So, friends, in the previous clip, we talked about how I realized that I myself, and maybe even you, are a fusion of two civilizations, the modern and the Indic civilization. And we also looked at the longevity, where we established that the modern civilization, which started with the Renaissance, is just about 500 odd years old, was inspired by the Roman civilization, which lasted for 700 years, and that in turn was inspired by the Greek civilization, which also lasted for 700 to 700 years. Whilst the fusion of the Indic civilization within us, and we realized could have been anything from 17,000 years to 3,500 years at the least. So the fact that there is such a difference in longevity, and we said, hey, then let's look at a few other parameters and compare the two. And in that process, we said, all right, we're going to look at economy, we'll look at the law, we'll look at education or science and mathematics. We'll look at language, and we'll just compare a few of these and see how does the modern civilization compare to the Indic civilization. And in that respect, in this clip, let me pick up on trying to compare the law between the two. Now, you see, in the modern civilization, you'll be aware, or if you're unaware, you should know that the modern law is based on the principle that the state can do no wrong. And you can check this with any legal expert, and they will tell you that yes, all modern law is based on the very basic premise that the state can do no wrong, which means the state is above board. And where does that come from? That comes from the fact that before the state there was a king, so the king can do no wrong. And where did that come from? Well, it comes from the fact that before the king there was a church. So the church can do no wrong. And remember, the church is divine. And why did this come about? Well, after the collapse of the Roman Empire, the European Dark Ages, as you would call, till the Renaissance, for about 1,000 years, it was the church that ruled supreme, and all law was the basis. The church was the basis of that, and it started from the fact that the church is divine. So the church can do no wrong, and hence the king, and hence the state. Now we might think that, all right, so what's the big deal about this? No, the big deal is that if that happens to be the premise of all law, then it has its flavor in the rest of the law, which is everywhere that there is a tendency to get authoritarian, or there is a tendency that the law can always be manipulated, because there's always a loophole where there is somebody who's above law, and that happens to be the state. And this then you can see in the kind of strife we have in the way the modern law is being interpreted, how it is being manipulated, and all those things, all those ills that can come from this very basic premise where we say the state can do no wrong. Now let's compare that to the Indic law. Now, Indic law, some of you might think that probably there was never any law at all, and that's wrong. I mean, societies have lived for thousands of years, so there has been always some kind of a law. And the Indic law has started right from the very beginning, which is called the Vedic law. And the Vedic law has had many facets to it. The most important thing with the Vedic law is that the king is not a divine being. So the king is always at the service of the people. Now imagine, now that's the basis of all law. That is that the king is at the service of the people. He's a servant of the people. And from that flows the rest of the law, and it also means, and there are people who will give you various verses from Manusmriti and try to say that this is very repressive or regressive and whatever. But hang on, let's understand one thing. Manusmriti in its original form, we do not know how it existed. Because the Manusmriti that is now handed down to us has been embellished a number of times at various times in history. And let me tell you that within Manusmriti itself you will find very severe contradictions, because Manusmriti had already and empowered the women as being supreme in society. They had given them all the rights with regards to men in terms of property, in terms of their status and everything. And yet there are also certain regressive points in the Manusmriti, which means that how do these within the same law two things that contradict each other so much and are so diametrically opposite exist there? It is obvious that some of these laws have been embellished later, because as our society went through in history, you must not forget that in the last 1000 to 1200 years, we as a society, the Indic society, has been through severe, very severe repression and pressure. And that times have changed, and as you will learn further as you keep hearing my clips, you will see how the society came under such severe pressure. And that pressure, be it a society, be it a family, be it an individual, can bring about changes in that person. And that is what has happened here too. So I'm not trying to say Manusmriti is a be-all and end-all of Vedic law. There's a very different faces of Vedic law that can be gleaned from various places. Some of the important features are, firstly, that the king is not divine, he's a servant of the people. So the power flows from the citizen, from the person, from the people. The collective is more individual than is more important than the individual. Women have a higher place in society, and then the legal system is such that law could be interpreted and disbursed at various levels, including the local family levels, at village levels, at community levels, at social levels, and finally the king's court could be the final appeal basis. And remember, one more fine thing in the Vedic law was that it was never one man's judgment. It always had to comprise of 2 or 3 people. Even in the king's court, it was the king might give the final verdict, but the judgment was done on the basis of 2 or 3 other people. And this is there in scriptures. I mean, even if you went as far as the Wikipedia and tried to check it, I'm not trying to say that the Wikipedia is the be-all and end-all of research or something, but it's quite commonly available information. So even there you will find this kind of a thing. So you can compare the 2 laws of the modern civilization, of the Vedic civilization, and try and understand how they're different. And that difference can have an impact on society and the way it functions today. Thank you, friends. We will get on to the next point. That is, we'll look at how the economic principles were different in the 2 civilizations in my next clip. Thank you for listening to me.